All right, we're going to call this meeting to
It was a
order.
nice campground. The one we went to up there.
All right, we're ready to go. We're live and on air.
Yeah, probably.
Want to whistle?
No,
Gavel?
I'm resisting the urge to use the gavel.
No, whistle.
Calling this meeting to order. The first items of business require a special session, so I will entertain a motion to go into such special session at this time. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. We are in a special session to first consider the approval of a memorandum of understanding with the Hagerstown Police Department and the FBI Child Exploitation Task Force.
You looking for the motion?
Yes,
Okay.
we'll entertain a motion at
I
this
hereby move for mayor and council approval to enter into a memorandum of understanding with the Federal Bureau of Investigation Child Exploitation Task Force. There is no cost to the city of Hagerstown, and overtime and other expenses will be reimbursed by the federal government of the United States.
I'll second it.
Motion made by Mr. Alshire, seconded by Mr. Munson. Any discussion?
Yeah, I'd just like to say this is a good move. This is a very good move, and it's involving a problem which is a very serious problem throughout our society, unfortunately.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. The motion carries and the memorandum is approved. The next item is for the approval of an amendment to the city's water and wastewater policy.
Mr. Mayor, hereby move the mayor and city council approve the attached amended City of Hagerstown water and wastewater policy. These amendments clarify that exception number 3 applies only to single-family and two-family dwellings on a lot of record in existence prior to certain dates, and it adds a new exception number 8 for affordable housing projects located in close proximity to economic development target areas and adjacent to development served by city water and/or wastewater.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Menzner, seconded by Mr. Munson. Any discussion?
Yeah, I just have two comments. When I said I would get back to staff, it was primarily to see water and sewer as to where they were since it was coming into the city as far as payment. And I was told that they themselves, not the people who live there, are the ones who are taking care of water and sewer. So we are not being hit with those that have skipped town and whatever, because we've got a lot of debt that is already from other places. Also, I needed to be certain about the language, and I know that it was gone over last week, but I wanted to know for certain that the language is strong enough that there will be no more exceptions unless we so choose, and not that they can come back and say, hey, you did it for this one, you're gonna have to do it for that one. And that was what the planning commission's summary basically was.
It's all on a case-by-case basis.
Yep.
I think it's also important to note with utilities that the plan is, I think right now there are 7 meters on the existing development. And those are meters that the utilities department is responsible for maintaining, I understand. Under the new development, of course, the existing development will be rehabilitated, and the plan is to install a master meter at the edge of that property.
Right.
That master meter then will serve everything beyond it, so that will be the existing development and the new development, which actually is a lot more efficient for our utilities department and makes business a lot easier, and will certainly realize an increase in customers, which is good for the utilities department.
Right.
Any other discussion, Mr. Munson?
I'd just like to make this point. Affordable housing is the responsibility of all governments, city and county, and including the state. And this allows the county to step up to its responsibility in that regard.
And I think it's important to make sure it's clear that there is not too much affordable housing in our area, in our city, in our region. There is still a problem with not enough affordable housing. The question is, where is the affordable housing? What does it look like? And how concentrated is it? And I think, without exception, we have a very high concentration of affordable housing, especially in the city center. And this move, I firmly believe, encourages just what you mentioned, more of a fair share of the affordable housing stock for the urban fringe, if you will, or that area outside the medium-range growth area. And this just makes sense. The planning department says that, you know, there's only a certain amount of appropriately zoned land in that particular region that could use an exception like this in the future. So there is no Pandora's box being opened here. But, you know, quite frankly, if more and more affordable housing was built on the urban fringe, I don't see how that would be a bad thing. Because I really do not believe we have too much affordable housing, but it is a matter of concentration in its current form. So, any other discussion?
I think that there are, you know, two parts to this motion. The first of which I am supportive of, which is an amendment to exception number 3 as it is written. As I stated last week, I'm not in favor of exception number 8. When I look at the list of amendments that we've made to the city's water and wastewater policy, you know, the outset of that was there is a finite amount of resource that the city owns and operates and manages to extend to the customer base in a defined area. And only under certain circumstances of which there would be some, and if you look at the other amendments, some issue related to sort of health, safety, and welfare, or the other, which is an effort to promote economic investment and development as it relates to job growth in the county, are those amendments sort of centered around. I think that this is a new avenue. I think it's a stretch to place it in any one of, or either of those sort of themes that we've set out, and I don't see the benefit, given that it's a finite resource and that we've pretty well said, you know, that we have an identified area for growth that we will likely have exceeded capacity for before it's built out.
I would just remind the body that this body did rescind our adequate public facilities ordinance because we saw that we do have plenty of capacity. We want to be more attractive to new development, not only within the brownfields, but certainly in targeted economic development areas. But I guess I would only observe that if we're going to have an exception for economic development projects, those would be the most heavily, consume the most of our resources, if anything. And to have an economic development exception really without an affordable housing project exception only further encourages, you know, all of the affordable multifamily housing to be built within the corporate limits of the city of Hagerstown.
That's the issue.
So, any other discussion on the motion? All those in favor of the motion proposed, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no.
No.
We have a 3-1 vote. Thank you all very much. The special session is now closed, and we'll enter into our work session agenda. The first item of which is to recognize Character Counts Month. And we have Ms. Carolyn Brooks and Ms. Rudisil from the Character Counts and Hagerstown Housing Authority to come accept this proclamation. Welcome and thanks for being here. If you want to face the audience there, we'll put forth this proclamation declaring Character Counts Week, October 16th through 22nd, 2016. Whereas the next generation will be stewards of our communities, nation, and world in critical times, and the present and future well-being of our society, it requires an involved, caring citizenry with good character. And whereas the character of the nation is only as strong as the character of its individual citizens, and the public good is advanced when people are taught that good character counts in personal relationships, in the workplace, school, and throughout the community. And whereas Character Counts provides a framework of universal values that transcend cultural, religious, political, and socioeconomic values through the 6 pillars of character: trustworthiness, respect, responsibility, fairness, caring, and citizenship. And whereas these pillars of character can be learned and modeled by all of the leaders of our community to improve interactions in our society among citizens of all ages, in turn fostering a higher quality of life and enhancing the image of our city. And whereas we count on our partners to help provide strong and constructive guidance for our citizens through character counts in our homes, our schools, religious institutions, civic groups, places of business, and community gathering places. And whereas the character and conduct of our youth reflect the character and conduct of society. Therefore, every adult has the responsibility to teach and model the core values, and every social institution has the responsibility to promote the development of good character. Now therefore be it resolved with the support of the City Council, I, David Geisberts, the Mayor of the City of Hagerstown, do hereby proclaim and recognize October 16th through 22nd, 2016, as Character Counts Week, and urge all citizens to seek out opportunities to incorporate these core principles into their work in parks and recreation activities, child care programs, community events, and I encourage all citizens, corporate and individual, to model these traits of good character in an ongoing commitment to promote character development and proper behavior throughout our community. So ladies, thank you for being here to accept this proclamation, and certainly character counts this week and the week of character counts, but it counts every day and every month. So do you want to talk more about what you're doing in the community?
I'd like to, thank you. But first I'd like to recognize that Aaron, we really appreciate the support of the city. Aaron and Sarah, and we've just met the new Chief Brito, and he's been very supportive of what we're doing. In particular, an event that we're planning that had been planned months in advance, but it's going to take place November the 16th, and it will be a conversation between law enforcement agencies and the community. So it is, like you said, right now it's a very important and critical time to be talking about character, and so we really appreciate your support.
Well, thanks for your continued efforts. Did you want to say anything? All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks again. Appreciate it. Thank you. Our next item is the Western Maryland Blues Fest proposed budget for 2017. Hi, Lauren.
Good afternoon, hi.
Welcome.
Thank you. Here to discuss the budget for the 2017 Western Maryland Blues Festival. It will be held June 1st through 4th of next year. This year we are holding a flat budget as opposed to last year, so there are no incremental increases to anything being proposed from last year. The one difference this year within budget is we have issued a RFP for a new sound technician, as the contract had ended at the end of last year's festival. That is going to be posted tomorrow and will be reviewed on November 2nd. So I will open to any questions or concerns regarding the proposed budget.
I have two questions.
Yep.
The first is, well, it's a statement and two questions. The first statement is, the budget that's been presented, just for future reference, it'd be good, you know, because I can remember the budget was around 160,000, and so as it grows, it'd be good to see what the previous year's was.
Okay.
Beside it in the document, but there are two items in here. One is sponsorships at $96,021. Do you feel that the committee feels confident in reaching that number, because that makes up a large part of the revenue side of?
Last year, in terms of sponsorships, which was one of our lower years, we did reach 97,000. Typically, we reach over $100,000 in corporate sponsorships.
So it's a conservative
So it's, yes.
estimate.
The second, I don't think is directly for you, but more for the conversation we had last week as it applies to donations to various entities in the community, nonprofits within the city budget. I think this is sort of one of the areas that I was referring to. You'll note on here, Washington County Arts Council grant of $1,500. I mean, I guess I just look at something like that, and, you know, if I had that type of information from an organization like that, that's something where I would say, okay, you know, I understand what the request is for. It's for this, and, you know, and it's a return, so to speak, on a direct city benefit. And so, again, I think that reiterates, you know, not in opposition to providing funding to that organization, but rather that it be targeted for a specific thing that directly benefits the city. So that was just a 2 cent sort of comment.
Got it. Any other questions or feedback? Looks good. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you.
Next item is the Hopewell Manor request for water under the exception number 8 in the wastewater water policy. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Kathy's ill today, so we wish her a speedy recovery. Alex is here to answer any questions we have in regard to the planning aspect of it. To continue our discussion from last week, once again, Mr. Davelbus is here representing Pax Edwards if we do have any information required from that group. But it is an existing 64-unit complex requesting an additional 60 units to be built. As the mayor spoke earlier, they'll be installing a master meter, so we'll be removing some 7 odd meters out to one full service owned by the property owners at this location. There was some questions last week, I think in regard, was brought up in regard to the AMI and how the calculation in regard to the average median income, and it does center around housing also. They take the consideration of the housing side into the calculation. So for this area, 80% of the median income for one person is $42,000 per year. And for each individual to a certain threshold in that household, it adds $6,000. So 3 people, it's $54,600 is the AMI that would be utilized in that. Does that seem right to you? Yes. So the request has been made of the county. We still require information from them regarding their backing of the project before we can bring it to the mayor and council. They'll need to get that to us by Thursday of this week so we can get it on the agenda if they want it completed in October. If not, we'll have more discussion at the November agenda to bring it forward to the council under exemption number 8.
Go ahead.
To Kristen's point a few minutes ago, what do we anticipate the amount of water that this project will require once it's built out? 60
units we're using right now, even though we have a 200 gallon per day EDU requirement. When we do a calculation for units of this size around the area, it's running approximately 70 gallons per day, so 4,200 gallons per day is what we could conceivably see for an average usage with the extra 60 units.
And
Yes, sir. And for them to purchase allocation from us, it'd be a little less than $50,000 in allocation, then plus their monthly fees for the usage.
any other questions, comments?
If I could add,
Please.
to what Mike said, for this particular exception, we would also, as a matter of future mayor and council approval, we would add that a pre-annexation agreement be added on as a condition of approval.
Certainly. Any other comments or questions? So the next steps will be, we're waiting for more information from the developer with the feedback from the other bodies
county,
mentioned
that's
in the amendment. And if the information is received in a timely way, we could conceivably bring this back
Correct.
next
We'll
week.
have a motion
Yeah.
for an exception to the agreement under exception number 8 and have all documentation attached with the motion.
Great. Any other questions or comments, concerns?
The
Go
county
ahead.
does want to move forward on this, right? I mean, that's their intention, isn't it?
That's our understanding. It's just been verbal at this point. We don't have any
It's,
documentation, but yes.
Communications, right?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
And Alex is going to be sticking around for the final item on our agenda, which is the rezoning of west of Burhans Boulevard North.
Okay, this is the proposed rezoning for Burhans Village LLC. To bring you back to you, work session is promised to follow up on our September 27th public hearing. And hopefully, at the end of this, you get direction from this body as to how you would like to proceed. Just to give you a brief overview on what we heard at the public hearing on the 27th, we took testimony from the applicant's engineer and an attorney on their reasons on why they believe the property should be rezoned from medium-density residential to high-density residential. They provided as an exhibit showing the townhouse subdivision with overlapping lot lines in order to illustrate the applicant's argument that it would be difficult to develop under RMED zoning, or at least their interpretation of that, and still be economically viable. They also had concerns about rezoning the property for a PUD overlay due to the requirement of commercial and mixed residential uses, that requirement under PUDs. And as stated before, the applicant's representation also discussed that if RH zoning were to go on this property, that they would be looking at developing it for multifamily workforce housing. In addition to that, this body heard from a resident who had concerns about traffic through the property, in addition to sidewalk requirements, which would all be handled at the development review stage, and the provision of open space in the development, which we would require for all residential development, assuming it had a density of 10 units per acre or higher per our ordinance. And as of today, we've not received any additional written testimony. And we heard also from you all just some concerns about development of this property under RH zoning, including further concentration of that multifamily housing in the city, the lack of homeownership opportunities should this development play out as proposed. Just want to remind you that a test for rezonings in Maryland is either a change in the character of a neighborhood or that there is a mistake in the existing zoning classification. The applicant, again, made the argument for a mistake, and the Planning Commission, while they didn't directly agree with the applicant's argument for a mistake, they formulated their own interpretation of why the rezoning was a mistake, and they recommended it to the mayor and council, the appropriateness of RH zoning. So, like I said, what I'm looking for tonight would be, the next step would be to have a vote of introduction of ordinance, and then if that gets introduced, then the next step would be approval or denial of the rezoning, which would take place in November. We would have the introduction on for the regular session of this month. So with that being said, I'm happy to answer any questions or hear any concerns you may have, questions or concerns.
I have a couple of questions.
Go ahead.
And I mean, it's obvious I'm not, I don't think it's accurate to say I'm not in favor of the proposal. I just think that the arguments that have been made by the applicant are contrary in their own argument to what they're purporting the reason for mistake should be. And I think that I pointed out that fairly clearly at the hearing. But to even further that, the staff report outlines the compatibility of proposed zoning district classification, and it talks about, and you talked about this a little at the meeting, where it said that, actually the area around this is even higher density, even though it's singles and doubles in some apartments in that immediate area. But in your report, you cite that it's about 18 units per acre instead of the 16 that RH would allow. But it says that the map that you provided us, or that the applicant provided us, was clearly an area of, I don't know, maybe 100 acres. Mm-hmm. So they sort of defined the neighborhood as 100 acres, right? But if I read this correctly, it says that the residential density of these residential properties is estimated at about 18 units per acre, 2.19 aggregate acres of adjacent residential divided by 40 units to get your 18. If the applicant's argument for mistake is in part associated with the defined neighborhood of, I don't know, let's say that area was about 100 acres. Why did we use only 2 acres of the immediate adjacent area as part of the argument that that specific two-street area of about 2 acres happens to be a higher density? If you were to take the area the applicant used in total, the 100 acres, you clearly would come up with a number different than 18, right? I mean, you would have went all the way out to sort of Scott's Speed Shop towards Western Heights and all the way over to Salem Avenue and east a bit, across Burhan's.
Conceivably, it could be lower. That was just, what was in the staff report was just an example of the immediate adjacent area, just to demonstrate that, the density. If a multifamily development were to go on there, the density would be no higher than what's immediately adjacent. Now, in reference to the map itself, the map was just to show just the vicinity. It wasn't, the map and the analysis that was done in the staff report are not necessarily the same defined area.
I understand what you're saying, but the onus here on the applicant to prove mistake is in part to utilize a defined neighborhood to do so, or a defined surrounding area to do so. And so we can't take in part an argument of that point to condense it down to just a small portion of it for that part of the argument to be made if the larger argument is being made. I mean, the applicant went out and into the areas of the old Central Chemical property and went up. I mean, it took that larger surrounding area to make points of argument for mistake as part of the argument. To me, I don't think that you, in arguing mistake, can pick and choose what the confines of that neighborhood are based on the point that you're trying to make. If that were the case, I could easily come back and take that defined area and point out, as I did, that there's no RH within a half a mile of that area, and argue that what we're doing is spot zoning a piece of property for the benefit and the direct and sole benefit of that specific property owner's request for a specific type of development. In that instance, there is no neighborhood argument to be made. You're simply zoning a piece of property to the benefit of the sole property owner for the sole benefit of their economic return, which I think clearly is one of the elements you would utilize to define spot zoning, if it presents itself. So that was the first point. And then the second is it talks about traffic in this report. And I understand that it cited at 200 or at 100 additional units, it would generate about 250 more people and about 640 additional vehicles per day. I think that I pointed out last week, and other members of council and the mayor, we talked about, being familiar with that area. You've got that sort of one-lane underpass, the honking horn tunnel that goes under Mitchell. Clearly, just as folks have utilized in the past, they cut through the dual highway out through Pangbourne. Clearly, folks are going to then avoid going all the way down Mitchell and underneath that underpass and around to the intersection there at Maryland Meadows. If you provide this alternative access at a much better road configuration that has both through lanes and gets you directly out to Burhan's Boulevard, or instead of using that little side street off Mitchell with Kenslow or whatever, clearly that vehicle number is going to be increased exponentially by the traffic that's then going to cut through it, not specifically the traffic generated by this development. So I understand taking the notion of 640 additional vehicle trips just by that development, but when you punch that road through, you've created an entirely new dynamic of traffic at a location that everybody could clearly argue is not the best location to which, of which to place that traffic out, because you got the bridge that sort of comes down there from the overpass, east of Central Chemical. So that's just the two additional points I would make.
Okay. Any other council feedback, Mr. Munson, or?
No, I don't have additional comments other than what I made last week.
Well, I did have an opportunity to visit the neighborhood over the weekend and try to walk as much of the property as I could to get the lay of the land, literally, for myself. But I did end up talking with people who live in the neighborhood, and certainly traffic is a very big concern for the folks there. But I think what's even more concerning is that I tend to agree with Councilmember Alshire that the mistake argument is not being really made well. And that is because, what I see would be appropriate for this lot, even with its topographic challenges, would be to extend the grid such as it is in that neighborhood, to be able to basically extend what current type of development is in the vicinity into this currently vacant lot. That's how the city grew for over 100 years with the grid style of development. And, I was on the planning commission when we went through this comprehensive plan. And the reason I don't think there is a mistake is because even though apparently the already developed zone where it is medium density, even though it would not be able to be built the way it is today in a medium density zone, I believe it was the intention of the Planning Commission at the time when it also zoned this vacant piece of property medium density, is that it would look like the surrounding neighborhood, that it wasn't intended to look or feel a lot different than what was in the surrounding area. And, I think that's the biggest hurdle in terms of making the change, the mistake argument. The surrounding land uses have been what they are for decades and decades, so that hasn't changed. I don't really know that it's a common planning practice to create a high-density residential zone between industrial land and seemingly what's already, pretty much a city grid. We have all kinds of residential home ownership types of developments along our railroad tracks throughout the city. So I don't necessarily buy the argument that the railroad creates.
Not only in the city, but in the county.
Yeah,
Very nice high-end homes very close to railroad tracks.
Yeah, and so I don't necessarily think that creates a barrier for home ownership. And quite frankly, there are some really nice views up on the top of the hill there, looking into the city there, up on the hill. So, I know I don't have a vote on this, but those are just some of my observations. I did ask Alex a little earlier today. I engaged him about this particular issue and just thinking out loud about, what can be done to facilitate the type of development we want in the community. And again, I go back to when I was on the Planning Commission. I truly believe it was the intent of the Planning Commission at the time, when all of that property was zoned the way it was zoned, is that it would look like what is in the surrounding area. Now, of course, a planned unit development was proposed. There is a requirement for commercial as part of that process. I don't see why that has to be a particular barrier here. There is a main thoroughfare close by to that. I asked Alex about, whether or not this would be appropriate for a special planning area. I would leave that to the experts, but I do think that, it is a challenging parcel, granted. I'll grant you that.
It's not the only challenging parcel that we have in our community, and it's not the only one that's created a lot of discourse. A great example of a very challenging property is that vacant lot on the corner of Eastern Boulevard and Potomac Street, which has been subject to many votes and discussions about changes. It still sits vacant even after the rezoning was granted.
It's one of the very few steep slopes in the city of Hagerstown.
But I think that if you, the example or successful example I think that you could use for a piece of property sort of in this location, in this position, and maybe coming up with that, compromise is the one that I think that we rezoned, I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago, that's over on the east end of town near Fairgrounds Park, where it was sort of one street, but it was a parking lot. And, we recognize, and it's near Tony Papa's Tavern, but like 2 streets
Down
over.
over,
Yeah,
yeah.
down
Yeah.
over the hill where the first
Yeah.
Sheets was.
Okay.
And we worked with the developer at that time to say, all of these houses are fairly skinny, they're fairly confined lots. We understand that parking, et cetera.
Yeah.
If you can build homes here,
Right.
similar to the homes that are there now, density-wise, scale-wise, I think even in that instance, we sort of gave some exceptions in order for that developer to accomplish that. That, I think, is what we would envision. I mean, as the mayor talks about,
That's it.
lay of the land at this particular location, placing a quad on that property and its sort of topography isn't gonna look like, a 2-story quad. It's gonna look like some type of 4-story building towering over what are largely single-level homes, especially down in the sort of, hollow.
In the hollow.
Area of Mitchell and McDowell.
In the case of the development that you just mentioned, Old Trail Estates, I'm talking about over on Fridinger Avenue. is
Yeah,
that-
the
Right,
Widener,
that's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one, it's a good example. The difference, however, the difference between that one and the site that we're talking about here is that those were already existing platted lots from way back in the teens or 20s. So when they were rezoned residential from commercial general at the time, they could just develop on those lots because we had provisions in our ordinance that just allowed them to develop.
But there's a way to develop those types of provisions in a cluster, called a cluster development. I mean, there's ways to write those things up to accomplish the task that I think that allows that party to develop the property at a level, it can economically do so, and for us to achieve some compatibility with the existing neighborhood.
Sure, and
We
I
can
don't think, I
clearly
wasn't.
write those types.
Yeah, I didn't say it was insurmountable, but yeah, I just wanted to make that distinction.
Mr. Munson?
Mayor, when we vote, I fully intend to vote against this change. I do not, for the reasons we've heard tonight, think that change is good for the community, this particular change, and I do not think that a mistake was made. But the fact is that last week, Penny nailed the most important part of the argument. We need home ownership in Hagerstown. We don't need additional rental properties. And I am voting for home ownership.
Mr. Mayor, may I suggest, first of all, I don't think the applicant really wants there to be a motion and a second made. And pardon me, and the reason I say that, and I don't mean that facetiously, but a motion and a second is going to require a vote as to whether or not there was a mistake. I suspect the vote would be 5-0 that there was no mistake. Having had that vote taken, it will be a fait accompli as it regards to sealing and signing that issue. So I would suspect that if it's on the agenda, that there won't be a motion made, and if there's a motion made, I suspect it won't be seconded. And I suspect that that would be a positive thing for the developer right now, because clearly this is not going to get a vote. I can't speak for Councilman Brubaker, but I suspect that would be the way it would go. I think I can speak
Which
for the 4 of us.
Believe then requires that applicant to wait at least a year, right?
Correct.
In order to come back and ask, and even if then, it has to be something substantially different than.
Yeah.
Are you suggesting that we not put it up for a
Well,
vote?
if you put it on the agenda, it's gonna need somebody to make a motion
Sure.
and somebody to second it. I suspect that that won't happen. But I would also suspect that the applicant, having heard this discussion, would probably prefer that it not happen. So it'd be up to the applicant when they want it on the agenda to find out whether there's a motion or not. But, I don't think there's anybody here I don't think there's 2 for a motion and a second.
Alex, you want to talk about
If
that?
I could add to that, since it was a formal request that we received, unless between now and when we scheduled it for introduction, unless the applicant withdraws the application, it would have to go on for a vote for
That's why
introduction.
Sure.
would recommend it to be some communication with the applicant.
Right. Thank you.
And if it doesn't get introduced, if it's a lack of a successful motion, or if it does get the motion in and it fails, then it goes, even with introduction, it would go no further. It would be effectively a denial at that point.
Right.
Which then, no rezoning application could be received on this property for a year. But also, should the applicant decide to appeal it, then they would have 30 days to appeal to circuit court.
And so you're saying that if the applicant withdraws the request, that does not create the timeline in terms of waiting another year? Or can you explain more if that is the case?
I have to check the state law on that.
Okay.
But I just know that if it's denied by the elected body, then there cannot be another rezoning application
Right.
for this property for at least a year.
And then they have 30 days to appeal?
Correct.
The decision, okay. Any other questions or points of order on this matter? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Alex.
Next up, we have our city administrator comments.
Nothing additional this evening.
We'll do council comments. I'll start with Mr. Alshire.
Wanted to thank the folks at Potomac Towers, the residents invite me there every 3 or 4 months to sort of talk to them and give them an update. You know, these folks, pretty much eat, sleep, and breathe downtown, every day of the week. They're always curious as to what's going on, and so it's always a good conversation. And they were curious about the trail and, what's going on over near the library and things like that. I think probably the 2 biggest points they raised, one was sort of access to a stable food source, being, a grocery store, somewhere in the urban vicinity, what is going on with the Hospital Hill property. So those were their 2 big curiosities.
Great. Mr. Munson.
There's an obituary in the paper today. The name of the lady is Audrey Munson, and she's a first cousin of mine, or was a first cousin of mine. Audrey was a woman I would probably describe as a saint. She was married to former County Commissioner John Munson, who died some time ago. And she was a wonderful human being. And those who loved her and knew her are going to miss her greatly.
Thanks. Ms. Nine?
I heard on the TV today that Waynesboro is now going to pass an ordinance, and it has to do with trash cans and bulk trash. And that there has been, in their ordinances as far as trash cans, and again, they have to add more to it. So we've actually come ahead of them, but I want to see if they make more ahead on this than what we have. Because I thought how amazing it is that we still are fighting the fact of no one can still move the trash cans back off of the street, and we still have bulk trash that's sitting just about everywhere. But it's amazing how the other communities are kind of like locked into it. Also, the 15th year for the hoedown, it certainly was a bummer. The rain came, but we never canceled. So I think they did say that there was about 500 there. We were there in the beginning and had to leave, but it still went on and it still was attended, and that was the plus part of it, especially for this end of town. And I took notice today as I was leaving Doctors that the Forsyth building down where American Little League is at is now going to auction. And at one time, when there was talk about revamping the old stadium, how that, of course, would have been an important part, either for parking or whatever, if in fact we were able to get the, what's it called, right there? The other building, Springworks. And I don't know if anybody has looked into that. I know that Rodney Tissue had been contacted before, perhaps about purchasing it, but I think that it's going,
Forsyth Building or the Springworks?
no, Forsyth Building.
It's on Mill Street.
It's
Yeah.
on Mill Street, because still the Springworks was actually up for sale and had actually gone
I think
down
there
in
was some
number.
discussion, but the price was pretty high on what they were
On
wanting.
the Springworks, well, they have up and down, but then they also then had reduced it. But this is going to auction, and I still think that it would be worth looking at.
Well, if there's a majority of the council that
You know, I mean, it's,
want our staff to participate in that option,
I
we
just,
could
you know, I,
certainly
don't-
look
because of
into
it
doing
going to
Purchase
that.
that
auction,
building.
you know, I just don't know how much, if they've even started and open, because I know that there's work that has to be done. Unfortunately, yes, it is an historic place, but I think because of the condition, it's gonna have to come down. But I'm just saying that it is a connection to our park, as well as the connection can be also to the stadium if it would ever go that far. But I have no idea as to how much.
And a connection to perhaps future development of the old hospital site.
Yeah, so the, you know, the Springworks, yes, is but at one time, they were actually gonna put that down to a low amount.
Is there any
So-
other interest on council of having staff look at attending the auction?
I
So this
don't
is-
see where it hurts a bit.
I-
It might
you know.
even help. I mean, we're
You
not
want us
making
to
any
I
kind of
think
bid, you're talking
commitment.
I
about
just think-
purchasing,
I-
putting a bid in?
I don't know, I don't even know,
Oh.
Valerie, when it is. I saw it leaving the doctors, I know
Yeah, I
that
don't
it,
have
I
any more
think it's
information about it
October.
either.
But I think that it would be worthwhile to just question the fact as to what the starting may be.
Well, we can
can
certainly,
look into it.
yeah,
You
look into
know?
it and get more information about it.
I mean, short of maybe Vincent Gurr will buy it, who knows?
I don't know.
I don't
But
know
thank you
either.
for pointing that out.
You know?
It's worth looking into. Mr. Metzner?
Thank you, Mayor. Sunday was very enjoyable. I participated in the, was it 200th anniversary of the first toes? if I'm
Was you
correct.
there? Yeah.
And that was very nice seeing everybody down there. And unlike Saturday, we would have had difficulty in finding a more beautiful day for that parade, and that was very nice. And on the same day, you know, there is a lot of community work going on that people don't know. And it fits in with, we have an election coming up. And I don't mention that for any purpose other than saying I believe the 18th is the last day to register to
14th.
vote.
This Friday,
This Friday?
I believe.
I think
Is
it's
it
the 18th, Mayor.
Okay, well,
I think the 18th
Even
is the
better,
last
more
day
time.
to register in the state of Maryland, and, you know, everybody needs to vote. And so the other thing I did on Sunday is a little-known thing is Sandmore decided, along with some other organizations, to take the Bester catchment area and try to help that area in a whole bunch of different ways, and they've done a very nice job of it. And on Sunday also, Sandmore, in conjunction with the NAACP and the local Jewish community, went out in that community and did voter registration on a door-to-door basis, and did a fairly substantial number of registrations, and I hope we're going to do it again on Sunday. But it is the beginning of coalitions that are getting together to work together. And, you know, we talk about making lemonades out of lemons. I think that coalition really started to gel after the horrible incident we had in our community that brought these leaders together and realized there's a lot of things that can be done in our community by churches and other good groups and good people. So there are positive things that come out of things sometimes, and I think that may be one of them.
stronger together.
Yes.
Well, thank you. I do want to also give lots of praise to all the staff and volunteers and vendors and visitors to the Harvest Hoedown, the 15th anniversary of the Fairgrounds Park. You know, I was remiss and I didn't read my notes when I was at the event. So I do want to point out a couple things that I didn't point out then, but not only does that event mark the 15th consecutive year of fun, free fall traditions for the family, but it also, of course, is the 15th anniversary of the grand opening of Fairgrounds Park. Fairgrounds Park was developed by the city of Hagerstown beginning in 1999. This park includes 70 acres and draws its name from the site's early days of service as a horse racing track and agriculture exhibition venue. Of course, it was historically the home of the Hagerstown Fairgrounds Association and hosted the Great Frederick Hagerstown Fair dating back to as far as the 1850s. Now, some people have recently contacted me, why don't we have a fair, let's do a fair again. I think it's important for people to know that the city did not put on the fair, that it was actually a privately owned piece of property and that the association would put on that fair every year. But they are monumental events to put on, to say the least. And but it is now one of the most highly utilized parks in the system. Today, the park is the site of the Junior Mason Parks and Recreation Building Complex that houses the city's Parks and Recs offices, the Police Athletic League, the Parks Workshop and Garage. And on November 1st of this year, we'll reveal the city of Hagerstown's first ever indoor recreation facility to host parks and recreation activities, programs, and events. Amenities at Fairgrounds Park include, of course, the off-leash dog park, the BMX track, the ice and sports complex, outdoor fitness equipment, repurposed stables with 72 stalls perfect for showcases and sales, walking trails, softball fields, soccer fields, multi-purpose athletic fields, and an inline hockey rink. So, of course, that is why it is one of the most heavily utilized parks in our system. So I wanted to mention all those little details because they are so very important.
And if I could, while you're doing it,
Go for it.
I can tell you, since I was on the council, when Fairgrounds Park became what it was, there was a huge amount of work put into what are we gonna do with this piece of property? And there were a whole lot of folks, maybe not a whole lot, but there were certainly folks who thought the best thing we should do is develop it into more residential and turn it into increase in tax base, and that. There was a huge push to make it almost solely equestrian. And up on the walls on the third or fourth floor, there were artist renditions of all various different things and huge community input. And what you see there is the result of a lot of hard staff work, a lot of work by elected officials, and a lot of input from the public. And I think in hindsight, 15 years later, all of those responsible did a really good job.
And also grant money from the state, which helped develop
Yes.
a lot of it too,
But
sure.
I need to let you know, because you wouldn't have, but Lou, you should remember, because they did try to get the fair, and we actually did have a fair, remember? Because I have got the poster from the fair, and that was right when it had gotten started. But you had to be able to draw,
Right.
and that was the big problem, yeah.
So anyway, congratulations to all those involved in making that facility such a great asset. I also wanted to recognize the neighborhood's first picnic. That was also a very beautiful day last Thursday, and Councilmember Metzner and Ms. Nye were there, and great turnout. I think there were probably over 60 people there, and the food was great, the fellowship was great, and just want to congratulate again the staff and all the volunteers in the community who make those programs successful. In the last 4 years, we have basically doubled the number of active Neighborhoods First groups in the city of Hagerstown, from 6 to 12. So I want to congratulate again. It's all based on the hard work of staff and, of course, people who are willing to get involved. I also want to recognize the Historical Society, which opened up their kinship, which is their genealogy library on the first level, the ground level of the Miller House. They've invested in rehabbing the facility to make it nice and clean and fresh and weatherproof, and they've organized a lot of their materials so that they're much more accessible to the public. But I highly encourage you to check it out. I left little pencils and notepads and bookmarks and a brochure of what the activities they had this past weekend for all of the council members and the city administrators, so that's where that came from. But it really is a great facility. You know, I'm a proud member of the Historical Society, have been for years now, but when I first moved to Hagerstown and bought a home in a historic district, I went into that library to look up, you know, the history of the area, and it was just an amazing treasure of information down there, and I highly encourage people to check it out. So, also wanted to give a big shout out to the Washington County Museum of Fine Arts. They had their 85th gala on Saturday, which was the honorary chair of which was the First Lady of Maryland, Yumi Hogan, and of course she's very graceful and very kind and generous to be with us for that event, and it was just a great celebration of everything the museum has to offer in our community. And I did want to mention one person. You know, Don mentioned his relative that passed away, but there was a member of the community who passed away that I wanted to recognize publicly, and his name was Cotton Howell. He was the president of the American Little League for several years, and he's literally 2 days older than me. And he passed away, I guess it was last week, and just want to acknowledge that he did so much work with the kids and the community and, you know, with his own family, but he treated every kid like he was his own. And I didn't know him that well, but just knowing him the brief amount that I did, that really came across with him. So I wanted to recognize him and offer our condolences to his family. And that is all I have for this evening. Does anyone else have any comments? All right, thanks. We'll be adjourned.
Thank you all for your board meeting tonight.
Your
Is anybody else planning to walk into downtown with the governor?
I won't be able to make it.
I will definitely do that. Okay?
Awesome.
We need to have an elected
Yeah,
official
it'd be
do that,
great.
and I'll
Thank you.
definitely do that.
Awesome.